made with spoken. Crescent Chronicles 22. I Told You We Would Work Together Someday, by Franetta McMillian. Digital narration performed by a tank. I told you we would work together someday. Papa Z, aka Zayden Storm. Crescent Region, U9 West. It was well past midnight, and I was doing emergency alterations on a neighbor's wedding dress when the front door buzzed. Jesus, I thought, who could it be at this late hour? I squinted to check the front door camera. I couldn't tell exactly who my late-night visitor was, since their helmet visor was partially morphed to opaque, so I couldn't see their face, but I could see they were tall, male, and decently built. I pushed the button for the intercom. Who is it? I demanded none too pleasantly. This had better be good. I'm busy. As soon as my visitor laughed, I immediately knew who it was. Z, open the damn door. It's David, and I've got a surprise for you. David? As in David Grove? All the way out in scary U9 West by his lonesome? Well, that was new. The furthest David ever went in the deep outside was Christie's in the 6th zone, and that's usually where we met. He hadn't been to my house since I was a senior in high school living with my mother. I was astounded he remembered where I lived. I quickly buzzed him in. Okay, but I can't visit for long. I'm under a serious deadline. I'll only be a minute, his crackly voice assured me. I've just got a surprise for you. I waited for him to step through decon, and soon he was standing in my foyer with his helmet in one hand and a shiny silver courier's envelope in the other. He had a perplexed look on his face, like he'd never seen a grown man bent over a sewing machine before. Z, what the hell are you doing? Altering my neighbor's wedding dress. The event's this weekend. Have a seat, if you can find one. He gingerly entered my living room, cleared some random fabric off the sofa, and made himself at home. He surveyed the room's chaos, trying to get his bearings. This place has certainly changed a lot since the last time I was in here. I should hope so, I snapped. That was over 35 years ago. Has it been that long? He asked. Yeah, I was 17 and Mama was still alive. And David Grove, the number 2 man at Ruby Biotech, had come to interview me for a position at the company right out of high school. By some miracle, I aced that interview, and he offered me the position on the spot. I'd be employed for a while part-time while they paid for my education through my PhD. I could study anywhere I wanted, even abroad. After I received my graduate degree, I'd owed him several years of service until I was 30. He gave me a week to think about it. Mama was over the moon. I mean, why wouldn't she be? It was an unbelievable opportunity for a poor boy from the upper ninth. I could leave the toxic deep outside behind and live it up in the dome until a ripe old age, working for one of the wealthiest and most respected companies in the world. I, however, wasn't so enthusiastic. I mean, I was just 17, and someone owning my butt until I was 30 was beyond frightening, no matter how golden the handcuffs were. I ruminated and tossed and turned almost a full week before I called the private number on the fancy business card David left behind. I wound up speaking to Dr. Ruby himself. When I stammered thanks but no thanks, the good doctor just laughed. He didn't think I would sign anyway. I took that as a signal I'd made the right decision, but things got way dicey after that. Mama threw me out of the house after graduation, and I moved in with my then boyfriend. Did all sorts of odd jobs, both legal and shady, while attending regional university. It took me nearly 8 years to earn a master's in computer science. Somewhere in there, Mama found a job in Pacific Coast region. I bought the house from her, and me and my boyfriend, who by then had morphed into a situationship with benefits, moved in. After the interview, I never expected to hear from David again. I mean, why would I? But he called me that summer, a couple of months after graduation, wanting to take me out to dinner. I was wary. It had come up in the interview I was by. Plus, I noticed some mutual attraction between us, and I had no interest in being some Domer's side piece, even if he did look like Marlon Brando in his prime. That was one triangle I wasn't willing to square. especially since David's spouse was the most famous man in the Crescent. But turns out he just wanted to talk about the deep outside, about the Crescent, about science, about voodoo, and things beyond the veil, especially about things beyond the veil. You see, David had the sight, and he was a scientist, and he was having difficulty reconciling the two. Plus, Dr. Ruby was out of region for a while on business, and David, a socially awkward transplant from upper Midwest, was lonely. After that initial meeting, we had dinner about 3 or 4 times a year, or whenever David and Dr. Lillian found themselves on different continents. David would rent a private booth at Christie's, and we'd talk and drink until the wee hours. Then I'd take the ferry home, and he'd go back to the dome. Mostly we'd discuss fringe science and spirituality. I found out early that questions about Lillian Ruby were off limits. Dr. Ruby was zealous about his privacy, and David didn't kiss and tell. I finished sewing the seam I was working on while David continued to survey the cluttered landscape of my living room. As usual, I had several projects going. I was building a custom laptop. I was developing some software. I was co-designing a tarot deck, and there was laundry that needed folding. Plenty for him to look at. Z, he asked suddenly, is there anything you can't do? I've been told by several people I can't carry a tune. He laughed. What's in the courier's envelope? I asked. He leaned back on the sofa, crossed his legs, and grinned mischievously. Wouldn't you like to know? Am I in trouble? It depends, he cryptically replied. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Come on, what's in the envelope? I asked again. David threw it at me. Well, I quipped, I guess it's not fragile. He only smiled in response. I retrieved the envelope from the floor, slid it open, and shook it. At first, nothing came out, and I thought David was pranking me, so I shook it harder until a small and fancy ivory envelope fell at my feet. The paper looked expensive, pure cotton rag. My full given name, Zayden Xavier Storm, was handwritten on the front in the most beautiful cursive I'd ever seen. Somehow I knew it was Dr. Ruby's handwriting. I turned the envelope over. Sure enough, the initials LHR were blind embossed on the back flap. Is this from Lillian? I asked. David huffed impatiently. Just open the damn thing, Z. I did as I was told. Inside was a formal invitation to a private seminar on multiplaneal illness at the Ruby Biotech Headquarters in the Dome in a little less than 2 weeks. I turned the folded invitation over to see if anything was written on the back. Hello, Mr. Storm, read Lillian Ruby's pristine cursive. I told you we would work together someday. Yours, L. I nearly dropped the invitation on the floor. That little note was a reference to our last conversation, which took place over 35 years ago. After I turned down the company's offer and Dr. Ruby had a good laugh and then told me he wasn't surprised I wouldn't sign, I asked him why. A mind like yours needs to fly, he said. Trust me, we'll work together someday, just not now. I was surprised he remembered. Who else is coming to this seminar? I asked. To tell you the truth, David replied, I'm not sure, but I do know he's invited at least one other person from the Crescent outside. And who's that? Supposedly the best ghost charmer in the 10 zones. Well, a couple of years ago, I would have said that was Brian Vichy of Chester Paranormal. But now, there's someone in region who's even stronger than him. I seriously do not know everyone Lillian invited. I don't have access to the guest list. Lillian just asked me to personally deliver your invitation. I couldn't tell if David was fibbing or not, so I left it alone. Meanwhile, I noticed a QR code in the main body of the invitation and grabbed my phone to scan it. There's a reading list for this thing? I asked. David seemed annoyed that I'd asked such a question. Yeah, Z, it's a seminar, not a party. I examined the list. A total of 5 articles with 4 from various medical journals and 1 from an exclusive professional online forum. Am I going to be able to understand half of this? I asked. I mean, I haven't read stuff this dense since I was in school. I have full confidence in your intelligence, said David. Then he added, I also have a bit of advice. Read and digest the material to the absolute best of your abilities. Lillian is a firm believer in the Socratic method, and should he call on you, he will show you no mercy, so you got to know your stuff. When he called on me, he nearly had me in tears. Didn't you first meet him at one of these seminars? No, I first met him when I was 16, and he came to buy out my uncle's stake in his company. Touché, I said dismissively. I'd say whatever happened, things worked out pretty well for you. That made David lower his head, nervously fiddle with his wedding ring, and blush. Though they'd been together nearly a quarter century, he still loved Dr. Ruby more than life. I was a little jealous. It had been a while since I'd loved that hard. Why is Dr. Ruby hosting a seminar on multiplaneal illness anyway? I asked. He usually doesn't discuss fringe stuff like that in public. David scoffed. He barely discusses it in private. That's why I hang out with you. No, seriously, why? Because the illness on multiple planes, is no longer just a thought experiment. Check out that case from the online discussion group. I clicked the link and scanned the article. I'd have to do a closer reading later, but it did seem like someone had indeed contracted an illness that was equal parts biological and paranormal. Basically, some hungry ghosts who'd perished in an industrial disaster hijacked a young girl's aggressive leukemia to exact revenge on the girl's father from beyond the veil. And oddly enough, the case seemed vaguely familiar. Holy shit, I swore in an undertone. Holy shit, what? Asked David. I think I actually read this girl once, I replied. It wasn't too long before Hurricane Kali. She was having recurring dreams about a woman with a dead eye following her around. Allison Nightflower brought her by. The girl was around 12 or so when a Dome Youth Corps volunteer. At the mention of Allison's name, David got the strangest look on his face, a mix of grief and abject terror. The grief I could understand. Allison and David had been close. He was like a big brother to her, the one person in the dome she could relate to. And I have to admit, I missed Allison too, even though we were on the outs when she passed. But why did David suddenly seem so fearful? Is she still in the Crescent? David asked. This girl you read? I can't tell you that. That's privileged information. He rolled his eyes. How about the woman with the dead eye? I don't know, I replied honestly. Is the woman even real? I shrugged. Maybe. Actually, I suspected she was. And if that was true, and she was in the Crescent, she was most likely the one who dethroned Brian Vichy as the best ghost charmer in the 10 zones. And if there was a possibility she'd been invited to the seminar, I was hyped. Z, what the hell are you smiling about? Nothing. Silence. But then I thought of another question. Is there another, more recent case of possible multiplaneal illness? Because the case in this article is over a decade old, and something about this seminar feels urgent. And before he could open his mouth to reply, I realized what he might have been afraid of earlier. Did Allison, perhaps, conjure something? She talked about it, he confessed, but by the end, she was too fucked up to do much of anything. Well, that was certainly true. It's why I finally stopped talking to her for good. She mostly spent our last days together, either in a blue sky coma, feverishly painting her magnum opus, Bleeding Lily, on the tar pit wall, or both. We barely spoke, and we weren't even good fuck buddies anymore. David said, you know she had a kid just before she died, right? Yeah, but it wasn't mine. What makes you so sure? I'm ambitious about keeping my shots up to date, and I practice safer sex. Condoms break, Z. Yeah, but condoms plus shots are damn near foolproof. Silence. How old is this kid anyway? I asked, assuming he or she is still alive. 7, David replied, and she's a she, and she currently has an especially aggressive case of leukemia along with other bizarro symptoms. Did the kid inherit the sight from Allison? Frankly, I don't know. Etta won't let me near her. Why? She blames me for Allison's descent into madness, I was supposed to be keeping an eye on her during her banishment from the dome. Why couldn't Etta babysit her? I snapped. Allison was her sister. They weren't talking. I shook my head. Seems Allison shut everyone out towards the end. Then, if Etta won't let you near the kid, how do you know about her leukemia with bizarro symptoms? David hesitated before he spoke. Lillian went to read the girl, he mumbled. Lillian can read illness? I asked, surprised. Now, I already knew Dr. Ruby had the gift. That was one of the tidbits David let slip before he formally declared Lillian's personal details out of bounds. But I'd always assumed Dr. Ruby's gift was on par with David's. Nothing to sneeze at, but still not truly exceptional. But you had to be a special kind of strong to read illness. Yes, David reluctantly replied. Damn, I swore, you're just full of surprises tonight. Suddenly, David's face got scary serious. That stays between us, Z. I mean it. Of course, my lips are sealed. Silence. After that awkward exchange, I asked David if he wanted any coffee before I had to kick him out. I still had about an hour's worth of work to do on the dress before Martina came in for a final fitting at 5 a.m. sharp. I'll pass on coffee, he said, but do you have any smoke? Sure, I replied. I've got garden variety weed and opium. Opium? Where'd you get that? I started towards the kitchen and motioned for David to follow me. A client gave some to Tango as a tip. By the way, David asked, how is the store in 4 East doing? Well enough, I replied as I ground the beans for coffee and David took a seat at the kitchen table. Tango and I own the building free and clear, and I've paid off the house and upgraded the decon chamber. Did you decide on what type of smoke you wanted? Garden variety weed, he replied. I grabbed it from a drawer. Got a smoke kit? He pulled one from the breast pocket of his Has suit, and I placed a canister with the weed on the table. He filled his pipe, lit it, and took a hit. Why is your kitchen so pristine while your living room is pure chaos? He asked through a cloud of smoke. Because kitchens work best when orderly and workshops do not. He chuckled. Z, you're a piece of work. I aim to please. David quietly smoked while I finished the coffee. I eventually sat down across from him to drink it. We kept silent until he asked a question out of the blue. Did you love Allison? You mean like you love Lillian? He nodded. Yeah, like that. No, I stated flatly, and he winced. Then I elaborated. I liked her. A lot. I respected her gift. Her art was fucking amazing. I see why people keep retouching the bleeding lily to save it from the corrosive mist. Shit like that should live forever. And she was one sexy stick of dynamite. David blew a cloud of smoke in my face. Ball lightning trapped in the body of a goddess, he mused dreamily. That's how Lillian once described her to me. I continued. But she also scared the living daylights out of me. Even before she was exiled from the dome, she had this rage inside her. I always got the feeling she wanted revenge and that she'd do anything to get it, no matter the collateral damage she'd leave in her wake. I loved her like a sister, David said quietly. I miss her. I clasped one of his hands in mine. Yeah, I do too. David finished his pipe and left. I got back to work on the dress and finished just in the nick of time. Martina came buzzing just as I was sewing the last stitch. After we settled accounts and she left, I nuked myself another cup of coffee and read through that case study more thoroughly. By the time I finished, I was sure of a few things. One, I definitely read the girl referenced in the study. Her name was Caitlin Tainer, and the hungry ghosts who possessed her sought revenge for the gas explosion at the Destination Hill plant caused by her father's negligence. Two, the woman with the dead eye was all too real and now living in the Crescent. She was the woman who cured Caitlin. 3, if Allison Nightflower wanted to conjure a similar illness, she definitely had the chops to do it. Maybe that's what all the blue sky comas were about. 4, David knew way more about Allison's intentions than he was telling. I swear that seminar couldn't happen fast enough.
The end. We hope you've enjoyed this production of
Crescent Chronicles 22. I told you we would work together someday. Made with spoken.
Professional audiobooks in a click. Spoken.